When unemployment fell, it's a huge call for celebration. Or maybe not. Well, in July, America's unemployment rate fell to 3.5%. That low unemployment rate is matching a half century low. You heard that well. Unemployment is the lowest in 100 years. More people are working than any moment in American history. Let that sink. So we are in a recession. Inflation is running amok, but unemployment is the lowest in 100 years? How is that even possible? That's why, for many, that means more consternation than celebration. An ultra-tight labor market is a challenge for companies. For investors and policymakers, it poses a conundrum. Does that mean the central bank may need to go ahead with more jumbo interest rate rises? Ever since the Federal Reserve began tightening monetary policy earlier this year, economists have debated how big a trade-off there will be between inflation and jobs. Maybe you did not know, but there's a correlation between inflation and jobs. Actions by the Fed to tame prices inevitably lead to weaker growth. And that should hurt big time the labor market. It means there should be more unemployment, not less. You see, when you are tightening the credit, you are loosening unemployment. Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, has long insisted that labor market tightness may mean there is a path whereby companies can reduce their demand for new workers without large number ending up on the door. In other words, the trade-off between inflation and jobs could be less severe than in previous periods of monetary tightening. What? Worse even, when interest rises, it should reduce the economic activity. That's actually the main reason to raise interest rates. And maybe that's the only reason. In theory, by raising interest rates, you are killing the economic activity. If there is less economic activity, enterprises should freeze hiring or even let go employees. But there are still millions of advertised jobs that nobody wants. And nobody wants them because there's not enough people in the labor market. That's a sign that the economy is not cooling off. That's the sign that maybe we are not in a recession. But wait a minute. Didn't we just declare a recession like a couple of days ago? So how can there be a recession and a tightening job market at the same time? If that makes sense to you, let me know below, because frankly, I'm running out of explanation and I'm not the only one. A reduced unemployment is the worst that can happen for inflation. If it goes below what's called the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment, that's a disaster. Maybe you know the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment as the NAIRU. It's also called the natural rate of unemployment. The NAIRU refers to the lowest level of unemployment that an economy can sustain before wage inflation starts to accelerate. So the concept of NAIRU was once central to economic analysis and to the Fed thinking about rates. That's their job. But we are now well below the assumed NAIRU threshold. So that's actually extremely bad news for the inflation, because the less unemployment figures, the more inflation will kick in with a vengeance, right? Low unemployment figures, a lot of inflation. That's how it should go. So you see, what's good for the country is bad for its people. Because the NAIRU has been part of the arsenal to measure and combat inflation for the past 50 years. But now that NAIRU doesn't make any sense, economists are just ditching it. Economists are just saying, forget about the NAIRU, when they just said the contrary for the past 50 years. So some say that the basic problem with the natural rate of unemployment and why some object to its use is that it's not observable. Okay, so certainly only what you can see is the truth. It's good to know. The NAIRU is based on the relationship between unemployment and inflation over time. Unemployment, inflation. When one rises, the other is going down. And when this one is going down, this one is going up, right? This is how it should work. But that's imprecise because structural changes in the shape of the economy during COVID will explain why the natural rate of unemployment likely increased during the pandemic. From the boom in delivery and warehouse work to the later recovery in restaurant and travel work, employers have struggled to keep up with the fast evolving staffing needs. Now, compounding on that, there has been a change in what people expect from their jobs, epitomized by the shift to more remote working. So one response from company, naturally, has been to offer higher wages. There you go. Not enough people in the workforce. So to attract more people, you raise wages. And when you raise wages, you raise inflation. You understand? So the lower the rate of unemployment, the higher companies are going to raise wages to attract more customers. And if you raise wages, you're going to create inflation. That's why that's not good for the economy. That's not good for the country as a whole. Hourly earnings are up by about 5% in the US and by about 20% in Los Angeles. And the true story behind all that is that the gap between the measured unemployment rate of 3.5% and the estimate natural rate of 6% implies that wage pressure is likely to remain high in the coming months. Okay, in plain English, it means more inflation. Okay, in real plain English, it means much, much, much more inflation. Do you follow me? So immediately after the latest job reports, traders reached out of their expectation for monetary tightening. They now assign roughly 2/3 odds that the Fed will raise its third consecutive 3/4 point rate in September. That's in 2 weeks. A pessimistic interpretation is that the Fed may have to keep raising rates until measured unemployment jump to the NAIRU level. You heard that well. The rate increase is meant to send people home in order to raise the unemployment level. Told you so. What's good for the country is not good for its people because that means that millions of people would lose their jobs. Now, a hopeful interpretation is that the gap may be closed not by unemployment rising, but by NAIRU falling. At a news conference, right after the Fed's most recent rate rise in July, Mr. Powell laid out this more hopeful perspective. Logically, if the pandemic and the disorder in the labor market caused the natural rate to move up, then as the labor market settles down, in principle, you should see it move back down. But the result is that wages are at least as important as unemployment in gauging the health of America's labor market. Now, it is impressive. It is absolutely impressive to see such a strong job growth at this point in the economic cycle. But only if that comes alongside a moderation in salary pressure. Otherwise, it's a consternation and not a celebration. And that's my take on the amazing low unemployment level of July 2022.